Welcome, everyone. I am Mary Axelson with WeMax Consulting and super excited to be here with you again today as we hit on another human-centered leadership topic. We're going to spend a little bit of time doing brief introductions. Then we'll share why this conversation is so critically important. And then we'll start to have a lightning conversation with each other. So, Amy, I'll turn it over to you first to introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Amy Wood. I'm a psychologist, and Mary and I partner on leadership development programming, particularly for women. And we deal with this issue of delegation a lot, and it's one of my favorite topics. And I'll tell you why later. Do you want to continue, Mary?
Yeah, great. The keys?
Yeah, absolutely. So happy to be here with you ladies. And my name is Dekise Lanier. I am in leadership. Particularly, I am in higher education and I'm an administrator in the enrollment management division. So I oversee enrollments. And then I'm also part-time faculty in the organizational leadership field. And then I also have my own small business, We Suite, which I empower women leaders like these ladies here.
Yes, we love your podcast.
Yes.
Michelle?
Hi, everyone. Also excited to be here and admittedly still work in progress on delegation. So you'll hear that in the questions that we cover. But I am the Chief Operations Officer for Combined Insurance and a mom of three and always on the go. Love a bit of chaos and crazy and also bringing all of that to order. So look forward to having a conversation and getting to know one another.
Great. Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah.
All right. So our topic is delegate to elevate, redistribute work to perform at your highest level. As leadership coaches, it is probably the number one topic that we spend the most time on with the leaders that we coach. Understanding why it's so critically important to delegate and how to go about doing it. It's so fascinating to see high performing leaders, yet at the same time, they're struggling to delegate. So we're going to talk a little bit more about why that is. Do we see any patterns or trends specifically related to women? Michelle and Dekise will share with us some of their success stories as well as their work in progress, and then we'll give you a couple delegation hacks. So with that said, Amy, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. So I think the most important question I have, which Mary mentioned, is that delegation comes up a lot in the leadership development, coaching, and programming that Mary and I do. And I'm sure Dekise and Michelle, it comes up for you too. So I wonder if each of you can answer this question. Why is delegation such a hot topic when it comes to coaching and leadership development? Why is it hard for leaders to delegate? Let's start with you, Dekise.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a hot topic, number one, because when you're juggling leadership, it really is a juggle. You have a lot on your plate. And I mean, so many of us do. I think all employees in any organization, we're all having to delegate at any level what's on our plate. But for certainly, since we're talking about leadership today, with leaders, it is very vital because you have to be able to provide the strategic vision. And if you've got your hands in too many pots, then you can't sit in the seat that you're supposed to be as a guider. You're not supposed to be bossing everybody around, although some people get in leadership for that purpose. Um, you are supposed to be guiding. You're a guiding light to others. And I just feel that when you are holding on to every little thing, every little project, you're not able to effectively guide. You're not effective in strategy either to think where should we be going, what's working, what needs to change, what's not as effective. What are we doing that's outdated? You can't sit in that seat appropriately when you're not delegating. And I think it's hard to delegate. I think that was the latter half of your
Yeah.
question. I think it's hard to delegate for leaders because most folks that step into leadership, they didn't, most of them, they did not get there being lazy. They were passionate, they were doers, they had agency. And those type of people have a tendency to want things done in a specific way. And unfortunately, we take on the old adage that in order for it to be done effectively, that I've got to do it myself.
Mhm.
And that's a fallacy we should not fall into. You don't have to do it yourself. And when you try to do it yourself, you send a message indirectly to people that their skills are not valuable. The competencies that they bring to the table do
Mhm.
not matter. So I think we have to be careful when we want to do everything ourselves because it's going to be done immaculately if I do it. And personally speaking, I have done, these things at a point or time or two, maybe three. For me, I think it is that agency. I am a doer and I like to do things with speed. So sometimes I've not delegated well because it's like, okay, I want this done. And in my head, I have a timeline, but I may not have always communicated that timeline. And so it's like, I'll just do it because it's not done yet. So,
Mhm. Yeah, there's a book that comes to mind as you're talking, a management book that was written a while ago by Marshall Goldsmith, the famous management consultant, and it's called "What Got You Here Won't Get You There," and that's
Mm-hmm.
a big message in that book. What I find with coaching clients that are having trouble with delegating is, like you said, because they're very ambitious people and very driven and used to doing it all. And it's hard for them to not behave that way and just move up to the higher level work and let other people do that
yeah.
work. But also, there's a certain level of confidence you need to have that, okay, it's okay to let go and trust other people to be able to do this, knowing it's
Mhm.
going to get done okay. Um, and I have never heard anyone say before, but I think you're right that you don't want to give them that message that, oh, I'm not asking you to do this work because I don't think you can do it or you're not valuable.
Mhm.
Thank you for your
Mhm.
take on that. And how about you, Michelle? What do you want to add about why delegation's hard for leaders?
I think one of the challenges is it's hard to ask for help, right? Because it's admitting that, you maybe can't, you're not superwoman and you can't get it all done. And the other piece I think about when I think about situations where I haven't delegated, it's usually because I'm concerned that everybody else is doing so much and going in so many different directions that I'm putting more on them by delegating something else to them. And, I know in my world, everybody is carrying the weight of probably 1.5 jobs. And to add more to that just feels burdensome. So, as the leader of the organization, I sometimes feel like if I'm going to ask somebody to take on something more, it's going to be me, not a team member. So that's what kind of pings in my brain when you ask why it's hard. That's what I struggle with. But I would also say, when I've thought about situations where my boss has asked me to do something, I do think about, oh, he trusts me. He knows that I can get this done. So it also, I try to remind myself of the confidence that it builds in me when I'm asked to do something that maybe somebody else would have normally done.
Mhm. Yeah, I really love that, Michelle. One of the things that's also prompting for me, do you think as female leaders, we worry more, are more concerned about we're putting too much on our teammates' plate? Or do you think that that happens regardless of your gender identity?
I think women generally are caretakers and want to, care for and protect, their, whether it's their kids or their work family. I think we take that role of caretaker, provider. I sometimes call it my mama bear when I go into that like protection mode. And I can't say that I always see my husband kind of operating in that same mode. So he's quick to ask others to do things for him. So in my experience, it does tend to be more gender based, that thought around, oh, am I putting too much on these people?
Mhm. And I love there's a thread I want to pull on a little bit that you both spoke to. and that is that employees want opportunities to learn and grow and develop. And I like that last particular point around when you get delegated to, that it sends a message that you trust me, that I can actually get the work done. And Korn Ferry did a really great research a couple of years ago where they said trust, care and concern, and opportunities to learn and grow and develop are the top three retention factors. And we know that there's a lot of research out there around engagement and motivation too, attached to delegation. So can each of you share a story with us where you did delegate and what the outcome and the impact was associated with it?
Sure, I'm happy to start. So I have a pretty recent example. So my organization is made up of several different operational teams, and we have a lot of metrics that our business partners and stakeholders are interested in. And we were working to create a scorecard, essentially, that gets sent out monthly. And part of me was like, I really want to build this and design it because then it will be the way I want it. But then the other part of my brain thought, if I am really clear in what I need, I bet the people I asked to do it can deliver a better product. And so there was a point person that kind of led the effort and worked with the different business areas to pull together a very clear, concise, and pretty scorecard that I would have never been able to have done just because of the way that she, did charts out of Excel. And it was really a beautiful product in the end. And for me, it was just affirming that when you give something like that to people, they take it very seriously and they will do their very best work. And she was periodically checking back, is this meeting your needs? So I think that's an important piece too, especially if you have some control issues or some authorship that you want to have part of that. And so part of me is like just setting clear expectations, checking in often, being available for support along the way as well is a way that I feel comfortable delegating, but also supporting at the same time. And as a result, a much better product than what I would have created in a lot less time than I would have done it as well. So for me, it was a good reminder about how important that is to delegate.
So many great nuggets there in what you just said, Michelle. Sounds like you were clear about the goal and the outcome, okay, and what needed to be achieved and why. You were clear about the audience and who was going to see the product and the outcome. And then you built in check-ins so that you had that alignment along the way. The other thing that I love about that example is that you gave them visibility. And so aligning with what you both have been saying around opportunities to learn and grow and develop, like that visibility, especially for women, is so incredibly important. So thank you so much for sharing that. What about you?
Well, and you reminded me of the last piece of that. So once it was done, we had a work product. We were presenting it to our senior leadership team at one of our quarterly planning meetings. And originally, the person who had developed it and is the owner of it asked if I would present the information. And we got in the meeting and my boss turned it over to her. And I just sat across from her and just stayed, made eye contact and smiled and nodded. And she did an amazing job. And after everyone was speaking to her about how articulate she was, how clear she was about the intent of the work. And I could have very easily jumped in, and I was very intentional about just supporting her through eye contact and body language. So
yeah, that's great.
That was the icing on the cake for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Vicky?
Yeah, absolutely. I love Michelle's example. Before I get started on my example, I want to say something that kind of builds from the words we're using: value, trust. giving people a sense of freedom. And sometimes we don't do that as leaders. We don't create space for people to have that sense of freedom.
Mhm.
And I think that stifles the organizational growth when we don't provide that flexibility and that freedom, dare I say, to create and to innovate. So what we do when we are not willing to delegate effectively is we create robots and we pigeonhole people and we create a space where folks are afraid to do things and they feel like they have to ask for permission for every little thing. And then we get frustrated and we say, why won't they just do that? Because they're used to you holding on to it. They're not used to feeling that sense of freedom to be able to do anything. And as if I do this, then it's not going to be done right. So let me just go ask. And we can mitigate a lot of that by creating that sense of freedom. And to me, that deals with empowerment, that deals with empowering people. And Michelle just said support, that deals with supporting people through the process. Like, I'm not going to tell you how to do it, but I'm here to support you through the process and to bounce ideas and to be your thinking partner. But to allow somebody to be your thinking partner, you have to trust them. And so my example here is that I went through in my organization facilitating a move, an office move. And I was put in a unique position where, quite frankly, I was kind of forced to delegate a bit because I was seated in a different city from another city that I was responsible for operations in that area. And so in that move, there was a lot that needed to be done, a lot of decisions that needed to be made. And there was some kind of what I would call overarching high level decisions that I was responsible for. And then there's some other things that I could have, quite frankly, controlled all of those decisions, but it would have put more stress on me. It would have made I shouldn't say that individual, those couple of individuals, those individuals feel like they could not move left or right with certain particulars in that move that, they really could have made a call on instead of calling me every second to say, are you okay with this? Are you okay with that? And so I think, and I won't get into too many of the logistics of the move, but I will say that going through an office move entails a lot. And we were also dealing with like property management and a lot of those things. And there were some things very high level and signing off on things that I absolutely had to do as a supervisor. But then there are those things that I did not have to control. There's some things that sometimes we try to hold on to so tightly, and you have to really ask yourself the question, why? What is the purpose of my decision making here? Is it to have control? Is it to kind of flex my muscle and show that I'm in charge?
Mhm.
Being very transparent here, but these types of things. Is it that I just don't trust that individual? And so I don't want to give them any freedom to do anything because I'm terrified of what they might do, which if we feel that way, then that gets into some coaching things and some training things and different conversations we need to have. And then if we just can't get beyond that, then there's a different kind of conversation that we need to have. But ultimately, I would say empowering people and giving them the freedom to create. And you retain great people that way. People don't feel threatened or afraid, and they're excited to come to work. They're motivated to come and do things because they feel like they have a sense of purpose in the environment. And when they don't have that and they feel stifled, we deal with silent quitting.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I love that you brought up the words freedom and
Yes.
flexibility. They are like two of my favorite words.
Mhm.
Freedom, flexibility, and equity. And there's my three pillars that actually guide me. And in my office right now, I have my wall of dreams. And in the middle of it is the word freedom. So it's so great. The other thing is, I like the example because it's also very emotional. People get very attached to their space, when they're doing office moves. And
Mhm.
so if somebody hasn't done an office move before, there's a lot of emotions attached with it. And one of the things that you said that was, I think, important was where am I sitting in this? What's going on for me? Like, how is that guiding the way that I'm showing up and leading my team?
Mhm.
And also being clear about roles and responsibilities and where authority sits. And
Mhm.
so it's just incredibly thoughtful and insightful, the way that you approach that situation. So thank you for sharing that.
And that's a really great point too, Mary, kind of setting the boundaries of what am I responsible for, what are other people responsible for, what is okay and what's probably too much. So I definitely think those conversations need to be had when you are effectively delegating to kind of give those parameters so you don't have to worry about someone probably going too far. But at the end of the day, I think that that's also built over time. And to me, that's getting into a level of also just respect. And I think of just like the leader to member exchange theory there, applying that type of model, mutual respect. And you have that when you build that over the course of time with people you work with. When there is no respect, then you may have somebody that kind of jumps off the rails. But when respect is there and given equally both ways, even if there is something in question, what's going to happen, and I'll use me as an example. What's going to happen is I'm going to come to Amy and I'm going to say, hey, Amy, we didn't discuss this, but I was thinking this. Is it okay to proceed that way? But when there's no respect, then yeah, you might have somebody that's G.I. Jane and they just take off.
Which I know in my experience, I found it helpful just to say, I'm here if you need me. I trust you with this work. I trust your decision making. But if you want to check something, if you want to run it by me, I'm here for you. But you do not need to run things by me for every little decision. And I prefer you don't, because I've given you this work for a reason. So
Great.
That's
So
a good
Amy,
point.
before we go to our next question, Jillian has popped in and
Yeah.
said, I just want to read what she said out loud. So many awesome points are being made, and this resonates with me so much. It feels so relevant for many of us professionally and personally. So thank you for your comment, Jillian.
Yeah, thank you, Jillian.
Thank you.
Dr. Keys and Michelle, you apparently, from what you've said, you're clearly very experienced delegators. I'm wondering if you have any hacks you'd like to share, any suggestions for people who would love, people who are listening and watching us, who would really want to be a good delegator, but they don't know how to get started because they're afraid or, they don't want to let go or, all these reasons that we're mentioning. What can they do? Start with you, Michelle.
So I'll go back to something I said earlier. I try to think about, how do I feel when somebody asks me for help or to do something? And if I'm coaching others, I ask them to think about that as well, how that makes them feel, which is typically, I feel respected, I feel confident, I feel knowledgeable, that somebody has the trust in me to ask me to do something for them. So that for me is where I try to shift my thinking to, I'm not burdening somebody with this request. I'm actually giving them an opportunity to grow, to develop, to have visibility, and ultimately to build bench strength and succession planning and all of those things we need in our organization for the future. So that's my hack that I use in my own brain to try and get me comfortable with asking people to take on more things, knowing what they already have on their plate.
Yeah, I think that's a great hack. And it's really about getting out of our own heads and thinking about it from another person's perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about you, Vicky?
Yeah, so I think for me, and I'll speak to specifically the issue that I mentioned earlier that I personally had. When I have not delegated well, it has often been because I'm a speed runner. And I don't always articulate, my perceived, deadlines. I'm not really necessarily worried about telling somebody how to do something, but it is like, okay, in my head, by the end of this week. But that person, they have their own things on their plate. They have their own things going on that I know nothing about. I don't have that lens. So it's like, okay, I'll get to it when I get to it. So I think, psychologically, realizing that it doesn't have to be done my way to do it correct. My way versus correct are not the same thing. So
Mhm.
something can get done in a different method, but just because it didn't happen the Keys's way doesn't make it wrong.
Right.
So that's psychologically readjusting that thought process, giving a deadline if you have a critical one. Don't put that in your head and not communicate it. Let someone know, that this is my deadline, and then they can tell you that they have the capacity to do that or they don't.
Mhm.
And then you can seek resources and support elsewhere. So I would say those are my psychological hacks. And then from a more tangible standpoint, I would say I love collaborative tools. Uh,
Mm.
I love things like Office 365, Cloud, Google Drive, Microsoft Teams, Zoom. In Teams, I actually have a team channel and I have a task little, area in that channel. So I can go into that task area and I can set the task and it clears out my list in my head because that gets full really fast. And forget a traditional calendar. That doesn't even work for me anymore. I have to have digital everything now. And so having that task list, I can kind of go in there and see things move. And then they have the flexibility and the freedom to see that as well and kind of make their updates. So I'm not hassling them. They're not hassling me. Everybody knows from a project management standpoint where everything stands. So I love collaborative tools. I think those are the best, and it keeps you from necessarily constantly bugging someone. You get the follow-ups you need in real time that way if people effectively use the tools. But those are some of my
Yeah. Well, I liked what you said about collaboration, and I think that's probably one of the reasons I love the idea of delegating because you are involving others. You're not in a silo. You're working on a team. And
Mhm.
the other thing I really just want to add about delegation is what I love to do is delegate according to strengths. And I think if I
Mm.
look at it that
Yeah,
way, like if I can figure out what I'm really good at, what comes more organically to me than it does to others, and I can do more of that, then I'm more in the flow more of the time instead of trying to do those things I can't do well naturally, where it's
right,
more like
right.
resistance. And then if I look at that as delegating what aren't my strengths to people when it is their strengths. And
Mhm.
that's certainly how we delegate on our team here with Mary and Julian. It's all according to strengths. And so everybody's happy, not trying to push against their natural inclination.
Yeah. And I think to that point, Amy, that it really calls, and this gets into the coaching that you guys do, but it really calls for leaders to really understand their team members
Yes.
Mhm.
and not, out of sight, out of mind, and just execute. Because some people, they may delegate everything to the point where maybe they don't do as much as everybody else. They may delegate a lot, but they don't know their team. So they're handing out tasks that, is really difficult for someone to do, but may be a breeze for somebody else to do. Like everybody can't sit in a spreadsheet all day, but they might be able to get outside and talk to folks left and right. And somebody else that all that talking might exhaust them. So I think absolutely understanding people and understanding their strengths is huge.
Agreed.
Absolutely. And that's a great place to end. So thank you so much for joining us, sharing all these incredible tips and insights about how to be a better human-centered leadership, and doing that by delegating to elevate. So enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks again for being
Yeah.
here with us.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye.